There are moments in pop culture when a single line from one celebrity becomes the spark that reignites a decade-long mystery, and suddenly, the past is asking uncomfortable questions of the present. That's what happened when Curtis "50 Cent" Jackson publicly weighed in on murder allegations that have shadowed the hip-hop world for 30 years, naming and contextualizing accusations tied to Sean "Diddy" Combs. It's a story that blends true crime, celebrity courtrooms, documentary film craft, and the grotesque modern phenomenon of viral verdicts handed down on social media. When a figure like 50 Cent, a man with a history of blunt public calls out and a track record of producing hard-hitting documentary content, takes a stance, what follows is not just gossip. His words travel through millions of followers, are repackaged by influencers and mainstream outlets alike, and suddenly everyone who cares about hip-hop, justice, or modern media wants to know, what does he know? And what is he basing his verdict on? The answer is layered. Part of it is documentary material that's newly public. Part is decades-old rumors and investigations. Part is 50's own history as someone willing to sting established power. That mixture is combustible because it feeds both the thirst for truth and the appetite for spectacle. We need to be clear from the outset about what this narrative will do. This is not a courtroom. This is an exploration. What follows is a 360-degree unpacking. The raw quote that started the wave, the documentary framing that reinforced it, the actual legal record for context, the historical arc of the East Coast-West Coast violence that gives emotional weight to the allegations, and the ways modern digital dynamics, memes, influencer verdicts, and streaming platforms alter how society processes allegations. That's the structure you're about to hear. Evidence, context, reaction, consequence. When a figure like 50 Cent speaks with authority on a controversial subject, millions listen. But authority and accuracy are not the same thing. This narrative aims to separate the two, to examine evidence and counterclaims, to spotlight journalistic standards and legal definitions, and to ask you to think critically about the difference between persuasive documentary storytelling and legally established facts. From the public statement that ignited global conversations to the documentary's release, from legal baselines to cultural reactions, this story touches on identity, memory, law, and media in ways few celebrity moments do. To begin, we must define the players. Curtis 50 Cent Jackson and Sean Diddy Combs occupy different but overlapping peaks of contemporary hip-hop culture. 50 Cent's rise, from near-lethal shooting survivor in Queens to chart-topping artist, business mogul, and outspoken media personality, gave him a unique voice. Part survivor, part entrepreneur, part provocateur. He built a following that expects direct language and headline-grabbing proclamations. On the other side stands Sean Diddy Combs, architect of Bad Boy Records, tastemaker and mogul whose reach extends from music to fashion and broadcast. Where 50 Cent's brand is bluntness and hustle, Diddy's is influence and empire. Their histories intersect because, in hip-hop's public square, influence is currency. Disputes, rivalries, and public calling out are part of how the culture polices itself, and sometimes how it settles scores. 50 and Diddy have traded jabs publicly for years, from diss tracks to social media taunts. That history matters because when 50 Cent speaks about Diddy, his words arrive already color-coded by that rivalry. Some listeners assume bad faith. Others read them as a whistleblower moment, but the allegations 50's comments touch, references to violent episodes tied to the 1990s rap wars, are tied into unresolved deaths of icons like Tupac, Shocker and Christopher, Notorious B.I.G., Wallace. Those killings reshaped American music and cultural memory. They also left families and communities without legal closure. When contemporary commentary invites old suspicions into the present, it revives pain and pressure for answers. The moment that pushed this story from simmer to boil was not a press release or a court filing, it was a public statement. Whether delivered in a social media post, a podcast soundbite, or a clip from an interview, 50 Cent's language was framed as a verdict. After watching the documentary material and reviewing new accounts, he publicly declared that the allegations against Diddy warranted belief. The phrasing was blunt and absolute, the type of language that performs well on timelines and talk shows. But what did he actually reference? Multiple outlets reported that 50 Cent amplified material from the recently released documentary that assembles archival footage and interviews. Some of the footage in question included never-before-seen clips of Diddy and contemporaneous material recorded by parties close to him, material that, when collected and framed, prompted 50 to call for public reckoning. The phrasing matters because the media ecosystem transforms declarative social posts into news cycles. A line on a social platform can be replayed on morning shows, spun into think pieces, and act as a prompt for new witnesses to come forward. The speed transforms suspicion into a narrative that begins to feel like fact. And this is precisely what happens when a celebrity with a large platform makes a definitive claim about an unresolved or complicated matter. Equally important is the objective content of the claim. In many cases, 50's comments did not alone introduce new documentary evidence. Instead, they pointed viewers to curated materials, the documentary and interviews that together create a coherent, persuasive story. That's crucial. 50's role is best read as amplificatory. He didn't present independent new forensic evidence. He amplified a compilation that, in his judgment, supports suspicion. The legal consequences of amplification differ from the legal consequences of introducing novel physical evidence. The immediate study of public reaction showed the same split repeated across platforms. Some audiences viewed 50 as a truth teller, finally collating threads into a coherent narrative. Others saw him as opportunistic, weaponizing a documentary for clicks or vendetta. Both responses are predictable given the history between the two men. But the difference in perception matters because it colors how future institutions, law enforcement, civil litigators, corporate partners, respond to renewed attention. We should also note the legal team response from Diddy's side, which challenged the documentary's right to certain materials and pushed for legal protections. When an accused party's attorneys file cease and desist letters, it's a standard defensive step. It doesn't necessarily settle the factual dispute, but it does signal that the material's provenance and privacy concerns are contested. This is legal theater as much as legal strategy, part defense, part message control. Documentaries are arguments by assembly. A series producer chooses the clips, picks the interviews, and decides the order of revelation. That means a well-made doc can reshape public perception not by adding new facts, but by arranging existing materials into a persuasive arc. The recently released miniseries, executive produced by Curtis 50 Cent Jackson and released on a major streaming platform, is precisely that, a curated body of archival footage, new interviews, and courtroom materials packaged to tell a compelling story. Which editorial choices matter most? First, who the filmmakers put on camera. If the production collects multiple interviews from former staff, alleged victims, and investigators, their juxtaposition creates an emergent narrative. Pattern equals proof in popular perception. Second, the use of archival footage. Clips of a person speaking in one context can be recontextualized by juxtaposing them with later testimony or contrasting music and graphics. Filmmakers can guide how audiences interpret offhand comments. Third, Omitted perspectives. The voices not included matter in the inverse if a documentary does not reasonably represent rebuttals or contextual voices. Viewers are more likely to accept the film's thesis as complete. The documentary's release amid legal disputes over footage rights is familiar in controversies. Producers frequently claim they secured rights, while subjects attempt to block distribution on privacy and contractual grounds. Those legal skirmishes do not automatically negate the material's evidentiary value, but they indicate contested provenance, which, for viewers who care about procedural fairness, should be a red flag to approach claims with critical scrutiny. Asterisk. There's a second dimension: platform incentives. Streaming platforms and producers benefit from high engagement content. A provocative documentary about a towering public figure will naturally generate views, subscriptions, and press coverage. That financial incentive does not necessarily mean dishonest production, but it does create a commercial context where filmmakers might be tempted to foreground the most sensational material. Responsible documentary making often includes transparency about sourcing and a clear delineation between verified facts and uncorroborated claims. Observers should watch for whether the film does this. The documentary's real impact is downstream. Films can prompt fresh investigations. New witnesses sometimes come forward after seeing themselves or context in a film. Prosecutors may reopen leads if credible new evidence emerges, or corporate partners may take precautionary steps based on public reaction. That's exactly why a DOC drop from a high-profile producer matters beyond view counts. It can change the incentives for institutions to act. These decisions shape cultural memory and how future generations understand artists, collaborators, and contemporaries face immediate stakes. Festivals must decide whether to book acts associated with controversy. Labels must assess whether to keep producers or artists tied to disputed individuals. And younger artists must decide whether association is worth the reputational risk. The fear of guilt by association creates real career calculus. Legal ripple effects matter. If public pressure leads to civil litigation or renewed investigation, companies that did business with the accused could face subpoenas or discovery demands. That dynamic has corporate counsel scrambling to preserve documents, restrict access, and prepare for potential legal exposure. The industry reacts in modes: precaution, damage control, and long-term recalibration. These responses shape how the story evolves beyond the viral moment, altering money, memory, and institutions. Public accusations also carry legal and moral weight. From a legal standpoint, repeating allegations that are false and damaging can expose speakers to defamation claims. Public figures face a higher bar for defamation suits, but the risk remains. Ethically, platforms and creators must balance two competing goods: exposing wrongdoing and protecting due process. When institutions fail to act, public exposure can be a path toward accountability. But responsible exposure requires rigorous sourcing and transparency. The question of private footage adds another layer. When studios and filmmakers obtain material through contested means, the balance between public interest and personal privacy becomes a legal and ethical battleground. Courts often have to weigh First Amendment interests against privacy and contractual obligations, with outcomes that vary by case. Platforms face choices about whether to amplify or moderate explosive content. Some argue for fact-checking and limiting distribution of unverified claims. Others worry such moderation risks ideological bias and censorship. This is an unresolved debate in public policy and digital governance that has only intensified with influencer-driven controversies. Content creators and journalists bear an ethical obligation to make distinctions clear to audiences between allegations, suggestive testimony, and proven legal facts. Conflating these categories may sell engagement in the short term but damages credibility in the long run. After a high-profile amplification like this, several possible futures emerge. First, new witnesses could come forward. Documentaries and viral coverage sometimes prompt people with direct knowledge to speak, particularly if they feel the moment is now safe or consequential. If credible new testimony or documentary evidence surfaces, law enforcement could reopen probes. In rare cases, that evidence could support fresh criminal charges. But that outcome is challenging and depends on the material's evidentiary strength and whether it can survive legal scrutiny. Second, there might be more civil litigation. Even if criminal prosecution remains unlikely, civil plaintiffs can pursue claims with a lower burden of proof. Civil suits can operate as truth-seeking mechanisms. Discovery forces testimony, document production, and depositions that can illuminate facts otherwise private. Third, corporate partners may make precautionary business moves. Brands, festivals, and networks reassess relationships to minimize reputational exposure. That could mean temporarily pausing projects, retooling marketing, or, in extreme cases, severing ties. Such moves are often reversible, contingent on legal outcomes or shifts in public sentiment. Fourth, legal appeals and procedural skirmishes will continue. Defense teams pursue motions and filings related to evidentiary issues and media releases. Appeals on sentencing and challenges to documentary use of contested footage can stretch on for years, affecting public conversation even if they don't produce new facts. Fifth, cultural memory and curatorial responses will evolve. Institutions like museums, radio stations, and archives will decide whether to contextualize, de-emphasize, or continue to feature an artist's work. These decisions influence legacy and will be debated publicly as part of how communities remember cultural figures. Finally, and importantly, the story could simply attenuate. Public attention is fickle. News cycles shift quickly. A new scandal, a major sports moment, or a global event could displace it. If no additional corroborating evidence emerges, the viral momentum may fade, even as the documentary remains available for those who seek it. What should viewers take away? Amplification is not adjudication. A documentary's narrative power, combined with a celebrity's reach, can make a conclusion feel like fact. But legal proof is established through processes that demand corroboration, cross-examination, and standards that filter out unreliable testimony. Documentary filmmaking and journalistic inquiry both have important roles. Documentaries can surface overlooked evidence and reframe public debate. Good journalism will test those claims, identify incentives, and search for corroboration. The best public discourse includes transparent sourcing and space for rebuttal. Producers and influential figures who amplify content have an ethical responsibility to make those distinctions plain. The stakes transcend reputations. Families seeking closure, communities traumatized by unresolved violence, and an industry that profits from cultural memory all have real claims to accurate reporting and fair legal processes. Viral verdicts do not relieve institutions of their investigative duties. If anything, they should prompt more careful, not more careless inquiry. What happens from here depends on evidence. If corroborating materials emerge, institutions may act. If they do not, the moment will likely become one more contested chapter in the long history of hip-hop, power, and media.